I'm Emily, a 25-year-old woman, and I'm the youngest of three siblings. I grew up in a family where I felt like I was invisible, a background character in my own life. My parents were wealthy and socially active, always doting on my older brothers, Jason and Michael. Meanwhile, I was more like the forgotten book collecting dust on a high shelf. From as far back as I can remember, it was clear I wasn't a priority. Jason, the oldest, was the golden boy, smart, charming, and the one everyone bragged about at family gatherings. Michael, the middle child, was the fun, athletic one who had an endless stream of friends and trophies. I was just there. One of the earliest memories that cemented this was when I was 9. School had ended early because of a storm, and the teachers made sure every kid had a ride home. My name was the only one left on the checkout sheet as I sat on the school steps in my rain-soaked uniform. I waited for hours, watching the rain turn into a downpour and feeling the water soak through my shoes. Eventually, the janitor came out and asked if someone was coming for me. I told him they must be running late, but by then it was dark. I had no phone and no one left to call. After walking home in the pouring rain, I opened the door to find my mom flipping through a magazine. She barely looked up and said something like, "Oh, you're back. Dinner's in the fridge." My dad wasn't even home, and my brothers were playing video games in the living room. No one apologized or seemed to care. That wasn't the last time, either. They forgot to pick me up at school so often that my teachers started offering to drive me home themselves. It wasn't just about school rides, though. The neglect was everywhere. Birthday parties were half-hearted affairs where my mom invited her friends and their kids, not mine. Once, I overheard her telling a friend that she didn't bother asking me who to invite because Emily doesn't really have friends. Jason and Michael weren't any better. Jason would tease me whenever I tried to share something about my day, like when I got a good grade or made a new friend. Michael would roll his eyes and tell me to stop trying so hard to be noticed. At one point, I just stopped talking to them altogether because no matter what I said, it would turn into a joke. The extended family knew what was going on, but they always made excuses. My aunts would tell me I needed to be good or make your parents proud and they'll come around. Once I confided in my Aunt Sarah that I felt like I didn't belong in my family. She told me to be patient and that parents are just stricter with daughters. Looking back, I don't think she even believed what she said. Things hit a breaking point during high school. I worked hard to make up for what I lacked at home, throwing myself into academics and extracurriculars. My grades were near perfect, and I even got a spot as valedictorian for my graduating class. I sent out invitations to the ceremony, but my parents didn't RSVP. On graduation day, I scanned the crowd as I gave my speech, but their seats were empty. Later, I found out they had gone to one of Michael's basketball games instead. It wasn't even a championship game, just a regular season match. That moment solidified what I already knew. I wasn't a part of their world. They didn't care about my achievements or my life. When it came time for college, I applied to schools far away, knowing I'd need to do this on my own. Despite their wealth, my parents didn't offer a dime to help with tuition or living expenses. Jason got a new car when he graduated, and Michael had his dorm fully paid for, but for me, nothing. I got by with scholarships, part-time jobs, and loans. Living on my own was a challenge at first, but it was also the first time I felt free. I got a job at a bookstore, where the owner, Mrs. Kensington, became like a mother figure to me. I also started therapy, something I'd never have considered back home. My therapist, Dr. Morales, helped me see that their neglect wasn't my fault. Despite all this, my parents started guilt-tripping me for not visiting. They'd leave passive-aggressive voicemails about how I was too busy for family or how they missed me. This was laughable considering how little they'd cared when I lived under their roof. The final straw came during a rare trip home. I walked in just in time to hear my dad telling a neighbor they only had 2 kids. My mom agreed, adding that Jason and Michael kept them plenty busy. It wasn't a misunderstanding, they genuinely didn't acknowledge me as their daughter anymore. That night, I packed up and left early, vowing not just to leave them behind, but to erase them from my life entirely. I didn't want to be the forgotten child anymore. I wanted to be the person who forgot them. And that's exactly what I set out to do. Update 1. Kente. The day after I overheard my dad telling the neighbor they only had 2 kids, I made the decision to cut all ties. I started with the easiest step, blocking their numbers. My phone had always been the main point of contact, so I made sure to block both my parents and my brothers. Then I went through my social media accounts and removed every single one of them. I unfriended my parents, siblings, and even some extended family members who were more likely to relay information back to them. After that, I realized I needed to take things a step further. My parents were listed as my emergency contacts for both my workplace and my doctor. I didn't want them to have any say in my life, even in an emergency. I updated everything, listing my best friend Julia as my main contact. She had been my rock during all of this and didn't hesitate to step into the role. At the same time, I was still going to therapy. Dr. Morales was incredibly supportive of my decision. She pointed out that I wasn't being spiteful or irrational. I was finally setting boundaries. She helped me draft a list of things to do to ensure my parents couldn't interfere in my life. The next step was making sure they had no financial access to anything connected to me. I combed through my bank accounts, credit cards, and even my student loans to make sure their names weren't listed anywhere. Around this time, I started noticing how many of my so-called family friends were just extensions of my parents. These were people who had brushed off my experiences growing up, saying things like, "Your parents mean well," or "That's just how they are." I realized I didn't need them in my life either. One by one, I stopped responding to their texts and calls. It wasn't hard, most of them only reached out occasionally, and once I stopped replying, they faded into the background. But not everyone took my decision quietly. Word got back to my aunts and uncles, and they started calling me ungrateful. My Aunt Sarah, who I had once confided in, left a voicemail saying I was being unfair to my parents. Another uncle sent a long Facebook message about how family is everything, and I should let bygones be bygones. I deleted the message without responding. Thankfully, my close friends were nothing but supportive. Julia, especially, reminded me that I didn't owe my family anything. My small but tight-knit circle of friends rallied around me, inviting me to dinners and outings to keep my spirits up. One of them even joked that I was auditioning for a new family, which wasn't far from the truth. I also started tackling the legal side of things. My parents had once listed me as a beneficiary on a small trust fund, but I had no interest in keeping ties to their money. I contacted a lawyer to ensure my name was removed from any family properties or joint accounts. It felt freeing to know they couldn't use financial strings to pull me back in. My parents didn't stay quiet for long. They started sending messages through mutual acquaintances, accusing me of being dramatic. I ignored them, but the messages kept coming. My brothers also got involved, sending half-hearted apologies that felt more like guilt trips. Jason sent a text saying, "You're taking this too far. You know mom and dad love you." Michael followed it up with, "You're making everyone's lives harder. Just come home and talk it out." Neither of them acknowledged the years of neglect, or even apologized directly. Things escalated when my parents left a voicemail. It was my dad's voice, angry and strained, accusing me of erasing them from my life unfairly. He said I was being selfish and causing unnecessary drama. I deleted the voicemail halfway through. While all this was happening, I had a major career milestone. I got a big promotion at work. It was the kind of news I would have wanted to share with family in another life. But this time, I didn't even think about telling them. Instead, I celebrated with Julia and a few close friends over dinner. It felt good to be surrounded by people who actually cared about me. When the holidays rolled around, I experienced another first, spending them alone. I had always dreaded the family gatherings where I felt like an outsider. This year, I stayed home, cooked a small meal for myself, and watched movies. It was quiet but peaceful. Over the next few months, I started building a chosen family. These were friends who had stuck by me through thick and thin, people who treated me better than my own family ever had. I started spending more time with them, creating new traditions that felt meaningful. My parents made one last attempt to reel me back in. They sent a message through a mutual acquaintance, claiming my mom had a health scare. I didn't buy it. They had used similar tactics before to get my attention, and this time, I wasn't falling for it. By the end of it all, I knew this wasn't just about cutting ties, it was about taking control of my life. If they could pretend I didn't exist, then I could do the same to them. Their influence over me was gone, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly free. Update 2. After cutting ties, I decided I needed to go all the way. Blocking numbers and deleting contacts wasn't enough. There were still too many ways my family could interfere in my life, so I got to work removing every last trace of them. First, I tackled my social media. I had already unfriended my parents, siblings, and extended family, but now I went further. I combed through every photo, tag, and post connected to them. Pictures from childhood birthdays, graduations, and random family gatherings. Deleted. Posts where my mom had commented, "So proud of you," even though she never actually said that to my face. Gone. I scrubbed my profiles clean until there was no evidence I had ever been part of their family. It was tedious but weirdly satisfying. Next, I decided to legally change my last name. I didn't want to carry their name anymore. It felt like an anchor dragging me back to a past I was ready to leave behind. I spent hours researching the process and filling out paperwork. At the courthouse, when the judge approved my name change, it felt like closing a door I never wanted to reopen. My new last name had no ties to them, and it was one of the most liberating things I'd ever done. While I was at it, I contacted my lawyer to make sure my parents couldn't make any future claims on my life. I didn't want them trying to use my name for financial gain or inheritance disputes. My lawyer walked me through updating my will and making sure my assets were protected. I also discovered that my state allowed me to edit my birth certificate to remove parental names. It was a small detail, but it felt huge to me. I filed the paperwork immediately. I didn't stop there. I realized my alma mater still had my parents listed as emergency contacts from when I first enrolled. Even though they hadn't supported me financially through school, they could still request information about me through alumni channels. I reached out to the registrar's office to update my records and remove their access entirely. It was a simple process, but it gave me peace of mind knowing they couldn't intrude anymore. During therapy, Dr. Morales helped me process the deeper implications of these decisions. Cutting ties is one thing, but erasing family from your identity is another. It wasn't easy to face the reality of what I was doing, but it felt necessary. By the time I walked out of her office that day, I knew I was on the right path. With my new name and a clean slate, I decided to reinvent myself. I updated my wardrobe, got a new haircut, and started going by a nickname among friends. Even small changes, like a new email address, made a difference. Every step I took felt like I was reclaiming parts of myself that had been overshadowed by my family's neglect. Extended family didn't take my silence well. My aunts and uncles started leaving passive-aggressive messages, asking why I wasn't returning their calls. I finally decided to address them directly. I sent a short message to everyone still trying to reach me, explaining that I would no longer be in contact unless they respected my boundaries. Some didn't reply, but a few sent back long, guilt-tripping messages about how much this would hurt my parents. I ignored them. To make things crystal clear, I posted a vague but telling message on social media. I didn't mention anyone by name, but the implication was obvious. Sometimes, family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up for you. I'm grateful for my chosen family who loves and supports me unconditionally. It wasn't long before mutual acquaintances started asking questions. Apparently, people noticed my parents were no longer in my posts or tagged in family photos. That's when things escalated. My parents accused me of ruining their reputation. They sent frantic messages through old family friends, demanding to know why I was turning people against them. My siblings weren't far behind. Jason, the golden child, called me selfish and dramatic, while Michael went on a rant about how family is forever. Neither of them acknowledged the years of neglect or offered a real apology. It was all about protecting their own image. Around this time, I attended a major event at work, a promotion ceremony that felt like a personal milestone. In the past, I might have invited family out of obligation, but not this time. I celebrated with my coworkers and close friends, feeling fully present and supported. For once, there was no tension or awkwardness about whether my parents would show up and ignore me the whole time. It was pure joy. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a twinge of guilt here and there. Cutting off family goes against everything we're taught growing up. But every time I thought about giving in, I remembered how much happier and lighter my life had become. That guilt never lasted long. One day, I bumped into an old family friend at a coffee shop. She did a double take before asking if I was Emily. Apparently, my new look and energy threw her off. When she mentioned my parents, I simply said, I don't have contact with them anymore, and left it at that. The confusion on her face was priceless. That encounter solidified my resolve. I had erased them from my life, and there was no turning back. If they didn't exist to me, I didn't exist to me. I didn't exist to them either. For the first time in my life, I was fully in control of my story. Update 3. Not long after my name change and social media purge, my parents decided to take things public. I wasn't connected to them anymore, but mutual acquaintances began forwarding me screenshots of a post my mom made on Facebook. It was a long, dramatic rant about how their youngest daughter had abandoned the family without reason. She described herself as heartbroken, painting a picture of loving parents who were left in the dark about why their child had cut them off. The post was littered with vague phrases like we did everything we could and you never stop loving your child, even when they hurt you. The comment section was a mixed bag. Some people blindly sided with them, offering sympathy and calling me selfish. Others, mostly those who had seen glimpses of their behavior, asked questions that my parents didn't answer. A few even called them out, saying things like, but didn't you skip her graduation? Or wasn't she always left out at family events? At first, I ignored it, but then things escalated. They started reaching out to mutual friends, trying to organize an intervention. I learned about it through Julia, who had received a message from one of my aunts. The plan was to gather family and close friends at my parents' house to talk some sense into me. Julia shut that down immediately, telling them I wouldn't attend. When the intervention didn't happen, my parents tried to guilt trip me through another family friend, who sent a message asking, why are you punishing them like this? Don't you think they deserve to know what they did wrong? Around this time, my brothers joined the drama. Jason shared an old story about how I had thrown a tantrum as a kid when I didn't get what I wanted for Christmas. Michael chimed in with a tale about how I used to run to mom and dad for everything when we were kids. They framed these stories as examples of how I was always difficult and attention-seeking. None of it was true, but it was clear they were trying to sway public opinion in my parents' favor. After weeks of this, I decided to take control of the narrative. I logged onto Reddit and wrote a detailed post on one of the family drama subreddits. I laid everything out, from the years of neglect to the forgotten pickups, skipped graduation, and overhearing them claim they only had 2 kids. I included screenshots of texts and emails that showed their indifference and manipulation. I wasn't looking for sympathy, I just wanted the truth out there. The post blew up. Within hours, it was flooded with comments from people who had experienced similar family dynamics or were just horrified by what I'd been through. The thread quickly gained traction, and by the next day, it had thousands of upvotes. People were calling my parents' behavior textbook emotional neglect and praising me for breaking free. A few days later, someone from my hometown reached out. They were a freelance journalist who wanted to write about my story for a local newspaper. I hesitated but eventually agreed, as long as my name was kept private. The article went live a week later and described my experience in general terms without identifying anyone directly. It didn't take long for people in town to connect the dots. That's when my parents retaliated. They sent me a cease and desist letter through a lawyer, claiming I was defaming them. I showed it to my own lawyer, who assured me it had no legal standing. My parents had no proof I'd done anything wrong, and my lawyer even pointed out that most of my statements were backed up by evidence. Instead of backing down, I posted a follow-up on Reddit with even more receipts, old emails where my parents ignored my requests for support, texts from my siblings belittling me, and a photo of the empty seats at my high school graduation. The backlash against them intensified, and they stopped posting publicly about me altogether. Jason, however, decided to double down. He sent me a long email demanding I take down the Reddit posts, claiming I was airing family laundry and embarrassing everyone. He warned that if I didn't, they would consider me dead to the family. Michael sent a shorter message echoing the same sentiment. Through all this, I kept going to therapy. Dr. Morales helped me unpack the complicated emotions that came with being publicly vilified by my own family. It wasn't easy, but I focused on the positive changes in my life. Professionally, things were going better than ever. I had landed another promotion at work and was thriving in my role. My chosen family continued to grow as I connected with more people online who shared similar experiences. Some of these connections turned into real friendships, and I started to feel like I had a true support system. Eventually, I cut off every remaining tie to my family. No more mutual friends, no more forwarded messages, and no more updates about what they were doing. It was like they didn't exist, and for the first time, I felt free from the emotional weight they'd placed on me my entire life. This time, I didn't just block them. I deleted the entire past. Update 4. After cutting off every tie to my family and sharing my story online, life started to shift in unexpected ways. The Reddit post kept gaining attention, and people reached out to share their own experiences or thank me for being honest about mine. Eventually, I was contacted by an organization that advocates for neglected and emotionally abused children. They invited me to speak at a local event, sharing my story to highlight how neglect can shape a person's life. The event was small, just a group of people sitting in a community center, but it was a turning point. I told them about my childhood, the forgotten pickups, the indifference, the lack of support, and how I rebuilt my life from the ground up. Afterward, a woman approached me, tears in her eyes, and said my story gave her the courage to leave her toxic family. That moment stuck with me. From there, I got involved in a few online support groups for people estranged from their families. I began offering advice, sharing resources, and connecting people to therapists and legal aid. It wasn't something I had planned, but it felt right. Each person I helped made me realize how far I had come. Around this time, I had a random encounter that tested my resolve. I was in a coffee shop waiting for my order when I saw my parents walk in. They looked almost the same, except my dad's hair was grayer, and my mom had lost some weight. They didn't see me, and I didn't give them the chance. I picked up my drink and walked out without looking back. Later, I heard through the grapevine that my parents' social standing had taken a hit. Mutual acquaintances and extended family members were distancing themselves after the Reddit post and the local article. My parents had built their image on being a perfect family, and the cracks were starting to show. People began questioning why I would go to such lengths to cut ties, and the excuses my parents gave weren't convincing anymore. Some of my extended family also started reaching out. A few aunts and uncles sent emails apologizing for enabling my parents' behavior or dismissing my feelings. One aunt, in particular, admitted she had noticed how I was treated but didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't respond to most of these messages, but I appreciated the small moments of accountability. Meanwhile, my brothers weren't handling the fallout well. Jason and Michael had always been united in blaming me for family drama, but without me to point fingers at, they turned on each other. I learned from a former family friend that they were arguing about everything, from who got more attention growing up to who was responsible for the family's tarnished reputation. It was ironic, considering how they used to team up against me. One day, I got an email from a literary agent who had seen my Reddit post. They said my story had the potential to become a book and wanted to discuss a possible deal. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to revisit everything in such detail, but the idea of turning my experience into something that could help others was appealing. I agreed to a meeting and we started drafting ideas for a memoir. In therapy, Dr. Morales congratulated me on how far I'd come. She pointed out that I no longer felt tethered to my family's expectations or their narrative about who I was. After years of work, I had reached a place where their opinions didn't matter anymore. Around this time, I hit another milestone. I bought my first house. It wasn't huge or fancy, but it was mine. I decorated it exactly how I wanted, filling it with things that made me happy. For the first time, I felt like I had a true home, something I had never felt growing up. Then came one final attempt from my parents. A handwritten letter arrived in the mail, forwarded from my old address. It was long and filled with emotional language, talking about how much they missed me and how they regretted any misunderstandings. It wasn't an apology, it was a plea for me to come back without them taking responsibility for anything. I didn't reply. Instead, I took the letter to my backyard fire pit, lit a match, and watched it burn. It felt symbolic, like closing the door on that chapter of my life for good. To celebrate how far I'd come, my chosen family threw me a small party. Julia baked a cake, and a few close friends brought gifts like plants and books to make my new house feel more like home. It was simple but perfect, a reminder that I had built something real with people who truly cared about me. As I settled into my new life, I decided it was time for a fresh start in every way. I adopted a rescue dog, a scruffy little terrier mix named Milo. He became my constant companion, bringing joy and energy to my days. I also started dating someone I met through a mutual friend, and for the first time, I felt like I could share my life without carrying the weight of my past. The final step was changing my phone number. I had been holding on to the old one out of convenience, but it was time to let go completely. With a new number, new name, and new life, I had erased every trace of the person my family tried to define. For the first time, I felt truly free. Update 5. After changing my phone number and fully cutting off all remaining ties, my life began to transform in ways I hadn't expected. The Reddit post about my story continued to gain traction, and I started receiving messages from people who were inspired to take steps to leave their own toxic family situations. Some even shared their successes, thanking me for showing them that it was possible to break free. Knowing my story was helping others gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt before. In the meantime, my chosen family grew stronger. I spent more time with Julia and the close group of friends who had supported me through everything. We started a tradition of Sunday dinners, rotating between each other's homes. It was simple, homemade meals, laughter, and stories, but it felt like something I had always wanted. Over time, these relationships deepened, and I realized that the love and care I had craved growing up had always been within reach. I just needed the right people. Months passed, and something unexpected happened: silence from my parents. The frantic messages through mutual acquaintances, the guilt-laden attempts at reconnecting, even the Facebook posts, all of it stopped. I didn't know if they had finally given up or if they were too embarrassed to keep trying, but the absence of their noise was noticeable. It felt like they had finally let go. Not long after, Jason, my eldest brother, reached out through an email. He apologized, saying he hadn't understood how his actions had hurt me and that he wanted to repair our relationship. While it wasn't a full acknowledgement of everything, it was a start. I responded briefly, thanking him for the message but letting him know I wasn't ready to reconnect. It wasn't about anger anymore. I just didn't want to reopen that chapter. Professionally, things took off. I landed a dream job with a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting children in foster care and those escaping abusive homes. My role involved working on campaigns that raised awareness and funds for neglected children. The work was rewarding, and it felt like everything I had been through had led me to this moment. I was thriving in my career and making a difference at the same time. During this period, I also took a deep dive into personal growth. Therapy sessions with Dr. Morales continued to help me unpack years of emotional baggage. For the first time, I started reflecting on how far I'd come, not just in cutting ties, but in building a life where I felt whole. The woman who walked into Dr. Morales' office for the first time years ago was unrecognizable compared to the person I had become. One day, an idea struck me. I wanted to give back in a more personal way. With the help of some colleagues, I started a small charity focused on providing therapy resources and mentorship programs for neglected children and young adults. The project took off slowly, but the response was overwhelmingly positive. People began sharing their stories and thanking us for giving them tools they hadn't had before. It was a full circle moment for me, turning my pain into something that could help others heal. As I continued moving forward, I decided to take another big step. I went through my old belongings and found a box of family photos tucked away in the back of my closet. These were photos I had kept out of guilt, even after cutting ties. One by one, I went through them, deciding what to keep and what to let go. By the time I was done, most of the photos were gone. Deleting those memories felt like lifting a weight I didn't realize I was still carrying. To celebrate how far I'd come, I hosted a dinner at my new home, inviting my closest friends. We toasted to new beginnings and the family I had built. Julia, true to form, brought a cake with "Here's to freedom" written in icing. It was a small gesture, but one that reminded me how much love and support I now had in my life. A few weeks later, my story was picked up by a major online publication. The article focused on breaking cycles of generational neglect and how people could rebuild their lives after cutting ties with toxic families. The piece went viral, and once again, I started receiving messages from strangers who were inspired by my journey. Some even asked how they could get involved with the charity I had started. The attention was overwhelming, but in the best way possible, it showed me that sharing my story had real-world impact. Around this time, I learned through a former neighbor that my parents had moved away. Their once busy social lives had dwindled, and their reputation had never recovered after my story came out. It was strange to think of them as distant figures, fading into obscurity, but I felt no urge to investigate further. As the year came to a close, I adopted a second rescue dog, a golden retriever mix named Daisy, to keep Milo company. I also began exploring a new relationship with someone I had met at work. They were kind, patient, and supportive in ways I had never experienced before. It felt like another fresh start. To close this chapter of my life, I posted a final update on Reddit, thanking everyone for their support and encouragement over the years. I shared how much my life had changed and how grateful I was for the community that had been there for me. The response was overwhelming, with thousands of comments from people celebrating my progress and sharing their own stories. Today, I'm happier than I ever thought possible. The life I've built is mine, untainted by the neglect and pain of my past. For the first time, I feel free to look forward instead of back. This is my new chapter, and I'm ready for whatever comes next.